Welcome back for another deep dive here at Classic Books Deep Dive.
Glad to be back.
I'm Michael, and this is Joanna.
Hi.
And today we're going to be looking at a book,
Yeah.
a really popular subject, I think.
It is.
It's called The Art of Reading Minds: How to Understand and Influence Others Without Them Noticing by Henrik Fexeus.
Yes. Very, very long title.
Yeah, it's very long.
Yeah.
But it's a cool book.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And I think one of the first things that Henrik does is he makes it really clear
Right.
that this isn't about like mind control
Yeah.
or anything like spooky or
Yeah.
anything.
No.
He's like, this is about paying attention to what people are doing and then
Yeah.
trying to understand what they're thinking from that.
Right.
So it's really about the physical manifestation of
Yeah.
your thoughts,
Inner
emotions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's cool because I think a lot of people go into this thinking, oh, this is like,
Right.
I can control people's minds. Or
Yeah. Or I'm going to be able to like read someone's thoughts.
Right.
across the room or something like that.
Right. It's like, it's not that at all.
It's more like body language and stuff like that.
Exactly. So, I mean, right off the bat, he kind of addresses some of those assumptions about body language.
Right.
Like he calls out a big one, which he calls Othello's mistake.
Yes.
And I found this really fascinating because I think we all make this mistake where we think we just automatically assume that because someone is smiling, they must be happy, or if someone is like frowning, they must be sad or angry.
Absolutely.
But he says that's not always the case. There are all sorts of reasons
Sure.
why someone might be displaying a certain emotion, and it may not necessarily reflect
Right.
their true feelings.
That's right.
And he calls it Othello's mistake because, of course, in the play, Othello
Yeah.
misinterprets Desdemona's behavior, and it leads to
Tragedy.
tragedy.
Yeah.
And so he's basically saying that we all have to be careful about jumping to conclusions
Yeah.
based on someone's outward appearance.
And instead, we need to look for those subtle cues and inconsistencies that might reveal
Absolutely.
what's really going on beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like he's saying, like, be careful.
Right.
Don't just assume you know what someone's thinking
Yeah.
based on their facial expression,
Exactly.
because it might not be the full story.
There's a lot more to it.
Right. And this kind of leads into another key idea that Henrik explores in the book, which is
Yes.
this idea that there's not really a separation between the body and the mind. They're interconnected. They're constantly influencing each other.
Totally. Yeah.
And he even gives us a little experiment to try out,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. He says, clench your jaw, furrow your brows, stare intensely,
Yes.
clench your fists.
And just hold that for like 10
Yeah,
seconds and
yeah.
see how you feel.
And you know what? It actually works. Like,
Yeah.
you start to feel this, like, tension,
Yeah, you actually
this
get
anger building up.
like a little surge of anger.
Right, just from making those physical changes.
It's really weird.
And he explains that this is because those actions are actually triggering a response
Yes.
in your autonomic nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
which then leads to physiological changes like increased pulse and blood flow.
Yeah.
And your brain interprets those changes as anger.
Yeah.
So it's like this feedback loop
Yeah.
where your body is actually influencing your mind.
It's amazing.
And it's just this really simple experiment that really drives home the point that,
Mm-hmm.
our physical state can have a huge impact on our emotional state.
Right.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
So I think that's like a really key takeaway from the book is this idea that
Yeah.
if we want to understand and influence others, we need to pay attention to this mind-body connection.
Yes.
It's not just about what people are saying. It's also about
It's how they're saying it.
how they're saying it, their posture, their gestures,
Yeah.
all of that.
All of that.
And so that's where this concept of rapport comes in,
Yes.
which is really important in this whole
Mm.
mind-reading idea.
So rapport is basically about building a relationship
Yeah.
of trust and openness.
Yeah.
And he uses the example of like getting your kids to empty the dishwasher.
Right.
Even in a simple situation like that.
Yes.
If you don't have that connection,
Yeah.
if you don't have that rapport,
They're not gonna
yeah, your message might not get through.
listen to you.
Exactly.
So he's saying it's not just about barking orders or,
Yeah.
trying to force your will on someone. It's about creating this environment where
Absolutely.
they're more receptive to what you're saying.
Exactly.
And one of the techniques that he talks about for building rapport is mirroring body language,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. It's kind of like a subtle way of...
It's very subtle. It's
Yeah.
like reflecting the other person's posture
Uh-huh.
and gestures.
Yeah.
And it signals to their subconscious, I'm like, you're safe with me.
I like that. I'm like you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
You can trust me. I'm not a threat.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool
It is cool.
technique. And he talks about, It's not just mirroring. It's also adapting to the other person's communication style.
Right.
That can make a big difference.
He has this really great example where he's like, if you know a few words in someone's native language.
Even if you're not fluent.
Yeah.
Just that little bit.
It goes a long way.
It shows that you're making an effort to connect with them on their level.
On their terms.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, once you've built that rapport, he talks about how you can subtly influence the other person's behavior or mood by gradually shifting your own demeanor.
So it's kind of like you're in this...
Like a dance. Yeah, where you're responding to each other's cues.
Totally.
And you can kind of lead the dance a little bit if you have that rapport.
Right.
And so that leads into another concept that he talks about, which is this idea that we all have dominant senses. He identifies 4 main types: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and neutral.
I love this part.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so he says that...
So basically everybody has a
preference for how they process information. And it could be visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or neutral.
So like visual people are going to be
they're going to
more drawn to respond to images and things like that.
And colors and stuff like that.
Exactly. And auditory people are going to respond to sounds and music.
Yeah.
And kinesthetic people are going to respond to touch and movement. And then neutral people are kind of a mix of all 3.
Right.
So yeah, and he says that you can actually determine someone's dominant sense.
I love this. This is my favorite part.
By observing their eye movements.
It's so cool.
It is cool. Yeah, he calls these eye accessing cues.
Right.
So for example, if someone is recalling a visual memory and they look up and to the left.
That suggests that they have a visual preference.
That's so cool.
It is cool.
And then he gives all these examples of how you can use this information.
Absolutely.
To tailor your communication
for maximum
impact.
To whoever you're talking to.
Right.
So like if you're dealing with a visual person, you might use more
visual metaphors
and imagery and things like that.
Exactly.
And if you're talking to an auditory person, you might
use more sound effects,
change your tone of voice, or use certain sounds to
use more stories and things like that.
Yeah.
That would appeal to their sense of hearing.
Right. So it's all about kind of like speaking their language.
Yes.
Not just verbally,
but in a way that resonates
with their
primary
dominant sense
of processing information.
So I think that's like one of the big takeaways from this whole book is that it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And how you present yourself.
And understanding who you're talking to.
Absolutely.
And how they process information.
Exactly.
Now, another thing that Henrik talks about is emotions.
Oh, emotions.
Yeah. He says that emotions are constantly revealed.
Yeah.
Even when we try to conceal them.
Even when we try to hide them.
Yeah.
They leak out.
Through micro-expressions and subtle facial cues.
Micro-expressions are these really quick, fleeting facial expressions that happen involuntarily.
And it's really hard to control them.
Yeah.
Which is why they're so interesting.
Exactly.
Because they can reveal what someone's really feeling.
Even if they're trying to.
Even if they're trying to hide it.
Yeah.
He even talks about how Botox, which paralyzes facial muscles, can actually limit emotional expression.
You make people look less human.
It's like those stormtroopers in Star Wars.
Yeah, they have those.
They have these like inexpressive faces.
Yeah.
And it's really creepy.
Yeah, it's unnerving.
It is.
So yeah, he's saying that our faces convey a lot of information, even when we're not aware of it.
So we have to be careful about how we're using our facial expressions.
Absolutely.
Because they can betray us.
They can.
Even if we don't want them to.
Yeah.
And he also talks about how strong emotions can actually distort our memories. And perceptions.
He calls it Othello's mistake again.
He brings it back.
Yeah.
So it's like...
He's saying that if we're feeling really strong emotions... it can actually affect how we remember things.
It can cloud our judgment.
Yeah, it can cloud our judgment.
We might misinterpret a situation or a person's behavior.
Absolutely.
Based on how we're feeling at the time.
So it's important to be aware of our own emotional state.
Yeah.
When we're trying to read other people.
Because our emotions can really influence how we interpret their behavior.
Exactly.
So it's all connected.
It is all connected.
The mind-body emotion.
The whole 9 yards.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this book so fascinating.
It's really interesting stuff.
It's that it really delves into this interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Of all these different aspects of ourselves.
Right.
And how they all work together to shape our perceptions and interactions with the world around us.
Absolutely.
So I'm really enjoying this deep dive so far.
Yeah, me too.
And we're just getting started.
We got a lot more to cover.
We've got a lot more to cover.
Yeah, stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how much you can pick up from people just by, like, watching what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're learning to read a whole new language.
Exactly.
The language of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of reading people, I'm curious about something. Does Henrik talk about anything to do with, like, detecting deception?
He does.
Because that's always been something that's kind of like a
mystery?
Yeah, like, can you really tell if someone's lying just by looking at them?
Yeah, well, it's not as simple as, like, finding one telltale sign, like in the movies. You know, like they always touch their nose or something.
I think everyone has a tell.
Yeah, exactly. But Henrik's approach is more about looking for inconsistencies between what someone's saying and how they're saying it.
So it's like their words are saying one thing,
right?
But their body is saying something else.
Exactly. He calls it leakage.
Leakage.
Yeah, it's like their true feelings are leaking out.
Even if they're trying to cover them up.
Exactly.
So what are some examples of this leakage that we should be looking for?
Well, one thing is sudden changes in speech patterns.
Okay.
So, like, someone might start hesitating a lot more than usual.
Right.
Or they might suddenly start using really formal language.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. It could be a sign that they're trying a little too hard to control their message.
That's unbelievable. Yeah.
Or they might get really quiet.
Yeah. Or like their voice gets higher.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they're nervous.
Right. It's like our bodies are trying to tell the truth.
Even when our minds are trying to lie.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting technique that Henrik talks about, anchoring.
Anchoring?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of that?
I mean, like an anchor on a boat.
Well, it's kind of similar in a way.
Fine.
So anchoring is about creating an association between a specific touch, gesture, or word and a particular emotional state.
So it's like a trigger.
Right.
That brings back that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. He uses the example from that famous book, In Search of Lost Time, by Marcel Proust.
I've heard of that book.
Right, yeah. So the main character, he has this vivid memory of his childhood that's triggered by the taste of a Madeleine cake dipped in tea.
That's wild.
Yeah, so it's like the simple sensory experience becomes an anchor for this complex emotional state.
Oh, wow.
Right? And Henrik's point is that we can actually create these anchors intentionally.
So you could create like a good anchor.
Yeah.
Like to make yourself feel happy or confident.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. But he also cautions that anchors can be unintentionally created with negative emotions, too.
Oh, so like if something bad happened to you while you were listening to a certain song, then every time you hear their song, you might feel sad.
Yeah, or like if a parent only hugs their child when they're upset, the child might start to associate hugs with sadness.
That's sad.
Yeah. So it's important to be mindful of the anchors that we're creating.
Both positive and negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think this whole idea of anchoring is really fascinating.
It is, and it's a good example of how our minds and bodies are constantly interacting and influencing each other.
Yeah. And Henrik also talks about some really cool demonstrations that he uses to illustrate these mind-reading principles.
Yeah, he likes to do like little tricks and games.
Like what kind of things?
Well, one of them is called the bird in hand trick.
Bird in hand?
Yeah.
What is that?
So it's basically a game where you try to guess which hand someone's hiding an object in. And he gives 3 different methods for doing this, each based on a different mind-reading principle.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so the first method is all about observation.
Yeah.
You just watch the person really closely as they switch the object between their hands.
Like for little muscle twitches or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe their breathing changes a little, or there's a slight tension in their shoulders.
So you're looking for those really subtle, involuntary cues.
Exactly.
Because even the tiniest movements can reveal a lot.
They can. And then the second method is even more subtle.
Oh, hey.
So in this one, the person holds their arms out in front of them.
Okay.
And they concentrate on the hand that's holding the object, but they're not allowed to move their hands.
So how do you guess the right hand?
Well, here's the thing. Even though their hands are still, their eyes will often unconsciously shift slightly.
Towards the hand with the object.
Exactly. It's like their gaze is drawn to it.
Even though they're trying not to give it away?
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that tiny eye movement can be enough to reveal the answer.
It's like their subconscious is betraying them.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so what about the third method?
Okay, so the third method involves a bit of suggestion.
Okay.
You ask the person to close their eyes.
Uh-huh.
And imagine that one hand is incredibly heavy, like it's filled with lead,
Okay.
and the other hand is tied to a helium balloon.
So you're creating these opposite sensations in their mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even though their eyes are closed, their hands will often start to move involuntarily.
Really?
Yeah, in response to the suggestions.
No way.
Yeah, the heavy hand tends to lower slightly,
Uh-huh.
and the light hand starts to rise.
That's so cool. It's like
Excellent.
their subconscious is acting out the suggestions.
Exactly. It's another demonstration of how powerful our subconscious mind is.
Wow, these are some pretty awesome tricks.
Yeah, they are. And he also talks about using a pendulum.
The pendulum.
Yeah, like the kind that swings back and forth.
Oh, okay. But he's not using it for hypnotism or anything like that.
What's he using it for?
He's using it as a way to amplify subtle unconscious movements.
Okay, I'm listening.
So you basically hang a weight from a string.
Yeah.
And you hold it over a piece of paper with lines marked yes, no, and circle.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Yeah. And then you demonstrate the pendulum sensitivity by focusing on each line
Uh-huh.
and mentally repeating the corresponding word.
So, like, you look at the yes line and you think yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the pendulum will start to swing along that line.
Even though you're not consciously moving your hand.
Right. It's because your subconscious is sending these tiny involuntary signals to your hand muscles.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And those signals are then amplified by the pendulum.
So it's like a way of making your thoughts visible.
Exactly. Yeah. And then he uses the pendulum for actual mind reading.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, there are two main methods. One is you ask someone to think of a number they know, but you don't like their age or something.
Yeah. And you hold the pendulum over the no line.
Okay.
And you slowly call out numbers.
And when you hit the right number,
The pendulum swings to yes.
because their subconscious recognizes it.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And the other method is kind of like a lie detector test with a pendulum.
Oh, wow.
You ask someone to choose a person in the room,
Okay.
and then you hold the pendulum over the no line again,
Huh?
and you call out names,
Okay.
and they're instructed to answer no each time.
Even if it's the person they chose.
Right.
So they're trying to lie
Yeah, but their body might reveal the truth.
through the pendulum.
Exactly. When you say the name of the person they've chosen,
Yeah.
even though they're saying no, the pendulum might swing towards yes.
Because their subconscious is reacting.
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's
So
pretty
it's like you can't really hide your true feelings.
Not from a pendulum.
Not from a pendulum.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to have to try some of these demonstrations myself.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and they really show you how much is going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, like how much we're communicating without even realizing it.
Exactly.
I feel like I need to pay more attention now.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world has opened up.
Yeah, like I'm seeing things I never noticed before.
I know, me too.
It's really cool. Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive so far,
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
and we've still got more to cover.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about his insights on attraction yet.
Oh, yeah, we've got to get to that.
That's a whole other chapter.
I know. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about that. Okay, so we've talked about how to read people's minds in like everyday situations.
Right.
But does Henrik apply these principles to any like specific areas of human interaction?
He does. He has a whole chapter on attraction,
Ooh.
which is really interesting.
So he's talking about like flirting and stuff.
Yeah, basically, he's applying those mind-reading techniques to the world of dating and romance.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So he starts by pointing out that when we see someone we're attracted to,
Yeah.
our unconscious mind takes over.
Like before we even realize it.
Exactly. It's like our primal instincts kick in.
Interesting.
Yeah. And he says that this is why we often do things that we're not even aware of.
Like what kind of things?
Well, for example, we might start mirroring the other person's body language without even realizing it.
Like those subtle mirroring techniques we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Like we're subconsciously trying to create a connection.
To show them that we're on the same wavelength.
Right. And we might also start removing any physical barriers between us.
Like, what do you mean?
Like if we're holding a drink, we might put it down.
Uh-huh.
Or if we're standing with our arms crossed, we might uncross them.
So it's like we're opening ourselves up to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're subconsciously saying, I'm approachable.
I like that.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's eye contact.
Right. Eye contact is huge.
It's essential. And Henrik describes this specific pattern
Okay.
where we glance at the person, then we look away quickly, and then we glance back.
It's like we're checking to see if they're still looking at us.
Exactly. It's a way of gauging their interest.
And also building up a little bit of anticipation.
Right. It's like a little game of peekaboo.
I like it.
Yeah. And then once we've established eye contact,
Yeah.
we might start doing what Henrik calls preening behaviors.
Preening.
Yeah, it's basically anything we do to enhance our appearance.
Like adjusting our clothes or fixing our hair.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to put our best foot forward.
It's like the human equivalent of a peacock puffing out its feathers.
Exactly. We want to look our best for the person we're attracted to.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then Henrik also talks about something he calls the challenge.
The challenge, what's that?
It's basically a subtle signal that invites approach,
Okay.
but it also tests the other person's confidence.
So it's like a way of saying, I'm interested, but are you brave enough to come talk to me?
Exactly. He describes it as a posture where a woman might put one hand on her hip, tilt her head slightly, and squint her eyes.
Oh, I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's a classic flirting move.
And it's all subconscious.
Well, at least at first.
So it's like our bodies are doing all this stuff without us even realizing it.
Exactly. And then once we actually start talking to the person,
Yeah.
that's when our conscious mind reading skills come into play.
So we can use those techniques to build rapport and deepen the connection.
Right. It all comes back to paying attention to those cues and signals.
And adapting our communication style accordingly.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been a really insightful deep dive.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like Henrik has given us a whole new way of looking at human interaction.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about reading minds.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves better, too.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the power of our subconscious.
And how it influences everything we do.
Yeah, and how we can use that knowledge to improve our communication and relationships.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, from debunking myths to decoding body language to understanding the power of rapport.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And hopefully you've all enjoyed it as much as we have.
And if you have any thoughts or questions about the book,
Yeah, or if you've noticed any of these mind-reading principles at play in your own life.
we'd love to hear from you.
So feel free to leave a comment below.
And until next time, happy mind reading.